coal, as a primary question, is still the cheapest source and the most prolific source of energy, and that is the driving fact, and that's not going to change in the near future. So as long as you have emerging economies that need cost-effective energy, coal will be a cornerstone of that energy for the foreseeable generation. It's probably the next generation that's really where there's going to be a change. Keep in mind that the forecast for coal production is still increasing. So if you took a view over the next 3 or 4 years, coal production in 4 years is higher than what it is today. It's not lower. And I've been involved in the coal industry for over 30 years, and the numbers that are being mined today in countries like China are mind-boggling to what would have happened even 10 or 20 years ago. So it's the industry is very relevant. I think it's also it's a lot of people miss the point that it's also one of the biggest industries in the world in terms of who it employs and the flow-down effects in transport and industry drivers in terms of chemical production and so on and so forth. There's a lot more to it than just the obvious CO2 footprint.
Okay, and in terms of what you mentioned, coal production is expected to continue to rise in the coming decades. That evidently presents a problem for climate activists and people involved in trying to drive emissions down. So what can be done in the short term to change that paradigm? What technologies can be deployed, both in terms of mining and also the burning of coal, to ensure that those carbon emissions aren't all released en masse?
Well, I have a fundamental different view to a number of people that where people are trying to tax carbon as an issue and in some sort of way of making it more expensive. That's all it does, is make it more expensive. It's still, by a factor, still more efficient and cost effective for energy production. So I'd just stay away from the coal argument. It will exist on its own merit until something is better than it. So the point is to encourage something that's better than it. Encourage better battery production, or better fuel cell production, or better whatever it is. Get on with the next level of technology. The basic technology we're living with today is exactly the same premise and process that turned the Industrial Revolution 200 years ago. It has not changed. That light bulb is running on steam. It's coal. This is Poland. They're burning the coal. They're boiling water. It's running through a turbine. It's steam-driven light bulb. And the same is happening in London, and the same is happening in Australia, and the same is happening in North America. We're basically running the same premise of an Industrial Revolution from 200 years ago. It is obviously more efficient, and the processes continue to be more efficient. But the actual philosophy is no different to when Mr. Watt invented basic steam engines. So the point isn't to get hung up on the argument of what coal and where it sits in the world. The issue is to encourage the next level of generational technology that is so much more cost effective that coal, through its own economic relevance or irrelevance, then becomes passé. And until that happens, we're left with coal being the major contributor of power generation.
Okay, but tell me about the work that you're doing with Linc in terms of trying to perhaps keep some of those emissions underground with your sort of coal gasification division.
Well, Linc's clean energy, clean coal division is focused on underground coal gasification, and the driver there is effectively the word clean coal. A lot of people think it's an oxymoron. It's not an oxymoron. It's 70%, at least 70% more cleaner and more efficient than normal coal production. Lower CO2 emissions, etc., etc. But the biggest benefit is what it gives you, and what it gives you is clean gas. So let's take Poland as an example. Poland is rich coal, but it's very, very short gas. So the bulk of its gas production is imported from outside Poland. It's mainly Russia. And so it has to pay a premium for that gas. That has an economic and social impost to the country. It's basically paying extremely high first world gas pricing, $12, $13 gas, when America's paying $3 gas. And that sort of differential has a significant impact both socially and economically. What UCG can do is take the coal and create a clean gas at a much lower emissions footprint on a very small footprint, on a 1,000-acre farm. We can turn that into enough gas to run a 1,000-megawatt power station, or we can put it in a pipeline and start to substitute gas that's coming from Russia. And all at a cheaper price than what the current gas price is, or at the current power generation price. So this is a real world today technology that you can run that light bulb on tomorrow. Indeed we are in various parts of the world.
So just run me through how that works. So you burn it underground and what the fumes stay there, but the gas goes up. What's the basic premise of the technology?
Well, it's a gasification technology. So imagine a lump of coal, it's a solid state. If you were to put that in a confined space, like imagine a black box around it, heat the box up to 1,300 degrees centigrade, the solid coal will turn into a gas state. So it's a bit like boiling water, where the water will turn to steam. The same thing, you basically heat up the box enough in a confined space, you will effectively create a stream of clean gas. The ash and everything that will not be gasified will stay in the box, but the clean gas will then, you can vent from the box. And that's effectively what we're doing underground. We're drilling a horizontal well, very clean, just in the clean coal. We then heat up the coal to 1,000 degrees centigrade, only takes us an hour to do, has very little energy input. Once it's up to 1,000, 1,300 degrees, we just pump air down there, which is like blowing onto a barbecue. And then once it's sort of running, then all we need to do is keep that compressor pumping the air down there, and it will just consume the coal and turn it into gas and come out the second pipe. So one pipe goes in, and that's what we pump the air in, and then the other pipe takes the hot gas out. Once you've got the gas, you can run power generation, you can put it into a pipeline, there's a number of things you can do.
And what levels of carbon dioxide emissions stay down there then? I mean, what's the comparison between just burning coal, as we see from some power stations here in Poland, and doing it underground?
Well, basically it's about 70% less than normal. So if we were to say produce gas through underground coal gasification, bring that gas to the surface, and then put that through a gas turbine, a closed loop gas turbine, that's about 70% lower CO2 than a standard coal-fired power station that would be in Poland.
Interesting. And I mean, moving forward, what one of the big questions here is how you can get the whole world to make that kind of energy transition. And it's not often, owners of big fossil fuel companies come to these talks, I guess, and address anyone. So what can really be done to ensure that transition, continues? What from your point of view would convince big owners of big sort of oil and gas companies to, divest their holdings and invest in new types of energy?
You're never going to get a company that's making billions out of its core technology its core asset base to divest that and go into a new avenue, other than as a portion of its business. So it's 85, 90% of its business will always be its core assets, what it's good at. But you'll be surprised already how much of the super majors and the major independents, and even companies our size, we're $1 billion stock market business with 400 or 500 employees, we invest in new technology and new opportunities. So it always comes down to that economic driver. The minute you sort of get the box that can be picked up, and as I said, is as profitable or more efficient and easy to roll out, like a UCG, then that's when it starts to get economic momentum. Once it has economic momentum, it gets social momentum, and so on. Away it goes.
Interesting. Just in terms of Poland, the hosts here, there's clearly a very strong coal lobby here. What kind of potential does this gasification, which I guess you could describe as what sort of bridging technology, what potential do you think that could have over here? Is it easy to move it from different mine to different mine? Is it a fairly straightforward process?
Well, it doesn't even need to be out of mine. I mean, there is coal pretty much under most of Poland, so you can just have a vacant paddock in the back of nowhere, a farm, and we can drill it and have a couple of wells that will be making gas and could make gas for many years, or it could be near a coal mine and make use of coal that's not going to be made use. So this is coal that's quite deep. It could be 500 metres, it could be 1,000 metres below the surface. And coal's not mined generally at those depths. Poland tends to mine a bit deeper than most countries, but generally this is stranded coal. It's not coal that's wanted or viable at those depths or locations. So you can unlock that value, turn it into clean gas, and where in a country like Poland you've got abundant coal, we can turn that into abundant gas, and you can literally turn the economy and stop importing as much gas from Russia, start producing your own gas. The wealth stays in here, in your own backyard. Employment, technology transfer, development, all of that stays here, as well as, of course, energy independence. And that's, of course, a crucial issue and a crucial factor. And it's that energy independence. I mean, if you look at the USA today, they have $3, $3.50 gas because of the shale gas that's driving that. But that is a huge economic advantage, massive. So compare that to China, that is having to import LNG, it's higher gas pricing, et cetera, et cetera. It doesn't matter if you work for $1 a day, you cannot close the gap between, say, $13 gas and $3 gas. It's just too big an energy gap. So if you can start to bridge that by making cost-effective gas, keeping the money here, keeping the jobs here, not having to export the dollars to another country by buying the gas in, it is a huge economic, political and social benefit and can transform an economy like Poland to the point that underground coal gasification could well make Poland a net energy exporter. So instead of just burning coal, you could actually start running some of the newer power stations on gas, start budgeting on gas-fired power generation from your own gas produced in this country, start not importing gas from other countries, and indeed get to a point where you could export gas. It is a huge economic change for any country, but Poland is a perfect example.
Interesting. Just a final question on Australia. I know you've got a fairly high profile out there. The government there, I guess, isn't at the moment too popular at this conference, given its recent pronouncements about its carbon emission targets and climate finance pledges. What do you make of that? What do you think the current government's long-term strategy is surrounding climate change? Because presumably just blocking any initiatives isn't sustainable in the long term.
Yeah, look, it's really two questions, and if I may answer it that way. The first is the reason why the current Australian government is repealing the carbon tax legislation from the previous government was that the previous government never had a mandate to do it. It was something that was forced upon the population. It's a democracy. It's one of the oldest democracies in the world, and it was something that was put to. It was never put to the Australian people. It was something that was forced on the Australian people, and when it came for them to vote on it, they voted overwhelmingly not against that government and against what it stood for. Now, if it was managed better, if you're trying to force a change down someone's throat, don't do it that way. That's a message to probably some of the people at this conference. Don't force it down people's throat. Give them the choice to participate. And that was never given to the Australian people. It was forced upon them, forced upon industry. The cost impost was forced, from everybody from the grandmothers on pensions to people starting off with, their first house. So it was something that was negative from the start. It never had the mandate or the vote of confidence from most people in the country. On the second half of your question, moving forward, I actually know Tony Abbott reasonably well, the Prime Minister of Australia, and it will be more around the basis of incentives, about creating new industry, about cleaner industry, about incentivising the opportunity for a greener country on those sorts of grounds, rather than taxing the old industry. Now, exactly what that platform is, I can't articulate to you, but it'll be more along an incentivisation program rather than a carbon tax program.